a morning this week when I woke up and I was just afraid. I was just afraid. I was afraid about what's happening to our planet, and I was afraid about what was happening in our political system situation. I was afraid, and I seldom wake up in fear like that. And yet my heart was breaking, and I felt myself wanting to lament about the state of the world and the state of the planet and the state of our country and the state of, the news, for lack of a better word. And I noticed that because I had allowed a fair amount of that into my life unconsciously, that I woke up afraid. And my sanctuary, my home, my morning time, which is my refuge, and my place of refilling, felt desecrated. And I actually have noticed in the last number of years that as I have allowed things in through Facebook and news and different things like that my sanctuary, has felt challenged, has felt desecrated. And so today, as we talk about the light of love and we ask ourselves, what is it that we maybe can glean from the traditions that we're celebrating today or acknowledging today, Hanukkah and the Winter Solstice? I thought, you know what? My temple feels like it's been invaded. My personal temple feels like it's been invaded. And of course, that's what the story of Hanukkah is about. The Temple of Jerusalem had been invaded and desecrated by the Romans in the 150, 160 BCE, and the Jews were wanting to take it back. And so when we think about the temple, right, this beautiful walled sacred space, a deep sanctuary inside that had been overrun. And the Maccabees decided that was something that they were not okay with. They revolted, they had a war, and they took the temple back. And as you may know, they came in then to clean the temple up. They found it desecrated. They came to clean the temple up. And one of the things that you have in the Jewish temple is the eternal flame. And of course, as we know, there was only enough oil in the eternal flame for a single day. And it takes 8 days to press oil. And they didn't know what they were going to do. But you know what they did anyway? They lit the lamp. They lit the lamp anyway. And of course, that's the miracle, that it burned for 8 days. The entire 8 days it took for them to press new oil, that lamp burned. And I thought about that. The extraordinary faith that it takes to light the lamp, even while feeling inundated, even while feeling afraid. Isn't that the first thing that we have to do? We have to light the lamp of our faith, don't we? And we may not be sure that we have enough faith to last the duration of what it's going to take to come out the other side. But if we don't light the lamp at all, right? And what an extraordinary act of faith it is to say, by God, no, I'm going to light the lamp of my faith. I'm going to stand in my faith despite all that stuff. And I don't care how many stories I read about how terrible and awful it is and how hard it is and how horrible it is and all of those things. I'm going to light my lamp of faith anyway. And I'm going to trust that there's enough faith in myself and in humanity for us to find our way through. Even though it looks like we don't have a lot left. I shall not be fooled by appearances or circumstances or situations. I did notice, however, when I thought about these temples and the sanctuary that we create, is that sometimes that temple is actually a wall. And we put our heart inside there, and we try to make it safe, don't we? I'm gonna keep you out. I'm not gonna let you in. Now, there is some deep spiritual truth to that, right? If Mary Baker Eddy says we stand guard at the portals of our mind and we choose what enters there. What are we taking in that stirs up our fear? What are we taking in that colludes with our own internal concern about whether we live in a safe universe, whether we're actually smart enough to get ourselves out of the mess that we got ourselves in, all of those kinds of things. Yes, we have to stand guard at the portals of our minds, but I don't believe that that means we wall ourselves off. I don't think that's what that means. And I think that the idea that when we light the lamp, do you see the light shines? We don't take the lamp and put it in a nook in the wall and cover it with doors. Do you see? To make it safe. No. We actually pull that lamp out and we light it. Instead of closing ourselves off. Ernest Holmes says this: if one thinks impurity, and I was certainly feeling impure thoughts, I would translate impurity to be fear, negativity, hate, anger. If one thinks impurity, then their acts will be impure. If their thought dwells on purity and truth, then their acts, reflecting the mind, will make them pure and true. Let each resolve to be true to the self, true to this inner light, true to the truth as they understand it. And when everyone learns to speak the truth, a complete salvation will come to the world. And we will throw open the gates and the walls to our temples, and we will be sharing the light as opposed to protecting the inner sanctuary. And that's scary too, isn't it? I have years and years and years protection, safety. Mm-hmm. And how what shall we say? Should we just say how stupid it feels to let the gates down? Like, to put it bluntly, like, are you kidding me? What? But I don't think walling it off is the answer. I don't think it is bringing our temple into the corner, walling it off, and trying to make it safe that way. I don't think that's the point. I think the point is to light the light. And part of what calls us to light the light is actually our willingness to lament. Right? To feel the feeling, to feel the experience, to recognize it, to see what it is, and then to ask ourselves, now what? Right? And so the other thing that we're looking at today, besides this beautiful Hanukkah story, is the story of solstice. And as we all know, the story of the solstice, here's the quote from Ernest Holmes I just read to you. Sorry about that. Let us each resolve to be true to the self, true to this inner light, true to the truth as they understand it. When everyone learns to speak the truth, a complete salvation will come to the world. Ernest Holmes, right? And so if we're going to light that light, if we're going to feel that inner light and we're going to let it out and we're going to really light it, it feels to me that is exactly what we're doing in the winter solstice. And I really thought about this. I thought, every year we talk about solstice, and it's like, oh yeah, you light the bonfire in the dark and you beat the drums and you dance around it to ward off the evil spirits. Did you do that last night? Probably not, right? How many of us light bonfires in our backyard? Oh wait, I don't even have a backyard. I light the bonfire on my little patio. And I don't actually believe in evil spirits, and I'm not certain that my neighbors would appreciate me out there in the middle of the night banging the drum. And I thought, okay, so why do we talk about this? Well, and I realized that that's what I had done for 24 hours after that morning that I woke up feeling so afraid. That's what I did. Because first, I discovered that I was in the darkness. And if I were to equate the darkness that we look at in the winter solstice, one way that we can look at that darkness is that it is the overwhelming veil of fear that separates us from the light. It is that sense of being afraid that causes us to contract, that causes us to not be able to see. We feel blind. And so that darkness is when we allow fear to overcome us, when we succumb to our belief in appearances, when we succumb to the worldly wisdom, when we succumb to the fundamental idea that somehow we are separate from life itself and from each other. And we stumble around in the dark. Certainly I did that morning in a big way. I stumbled around. And then what do we do when we find ourselves in that place? What do? We reach for our spiritual tools, don't we? And I noticed that I beat the drum of my affirmations. In my mind, I was beating the drum of my belief. I was beating the drum of my faith. I was beating the drum of what I believed to be true. And I was, in fact, warding off the evil spirits of my own negativity. Warding off the evil spirits of that which I had allowed in, that which I had taken on in some form or fashion. Right? And so when we use our spiritual tools, whether it's an affirmation or meditation or spiritual mind treatment or talking to a friend or listening to a podcast or reading a book or coming here, all of those things, those are the ways in which we beat the drum within our own consciousness to awaken the light, to build that bonfire of truth, to dispel the darkness. Now, it took me a full 24 hours. A full 24 hours of being dedicated to beating that drum in my own heart and in my own mind. For me, the evil spirits were fear and negativity and doubt. Our evil spirits might be anger or blame. They might be hate. They might be falling into despair or anxiety. Sometimes it's the evil spirit of resignation. Well, there isn't anything we can do about it. Or isn't it always this way? Or here we go again. Each one of these, I'm using that idea lightly. I don't think there's spirits out there that are attacking us. But these are the evil spirits that we have in our consciousness that are roaming around in there when we are in our own personal darkness. And our job is to light the bonfire of truth and beat the drum of that truth. Ernest Holmes says this: the only power used in the process, if it could be called willpower, is a determination to keep the thought clear, to think about what ought to happen rather than about what ought not to happen, to be actively aware of harmony rather than discord, to believe that good will always overcome evil as light simply dissipates the darkness. That is what we are called to. That is what our spiritual principles and our spiritual practices remind us, that we have that power. We have that power within our own lives, and we have that power in our consciousness each and every time that we are willing to light the bonfire of truth and to beat the drum of our spiritual practices and to ward off the evil spirits. And what I noticed that day is that the more that I did that, the more I was reminded of all the other things that I had read, all the other ways that people are doing great work in the world, all the other extraordinary things that are being done nationally, internationally, in the business world, in local governments, in local places, and all the people who are doing amazing work to bring the light. Whether it's to our climate or to racism or to women or to children or to whatever it is, there is incredible good work being done. Am I going to look at what ought to happen, or am I going to be focused on what ought not to happen? And I recalled things that I had read, stories. Actually noticed that as I was out looking at things, that I was attracting to myself brand new stories that I hadn't even seen. Oh look, there's some light. Oh look, there's a little light. There's some light. There's somebody making a bonfire. There's somebody lighting their little oil lamp. Each and every place that I looked, I saw some light. And of course, when we bring our lights together, that's part of what creates a bonfire, doesn't it? But I have to do that work myself. I have to do that inner work. And the other thing I noticed that day as I was doing all of that work and really deeply working my own spiritual principles is that as the fear diminished, I was really surprised that there was an overwhelming influx of love. Love, the flame of love, started to burn within me. Oh my God, I have so much love for this planet. I have so much love for humanity. I have so much love for each and every one of you. So much love for my family and friends. And I see that over and over and over and over again in people. That love that burns so brightly, and it burns away the fear. Jerry Jampolsky was right. Years and years ago, he wrote a beautiful book called Love is Letting Go of Fear. Actually, it's impossible to experience love and fear at the same time. And if we are moving into that place of love, we are building that light within. Albert Camus says, in the midst of winter, sorry, I can't read it all the way up there. In the midst of winter, I at last discovered that there was within me an invincible summer, an invincible light. And so on the winter solstice, representing this longest day, this elongated sense of fear or doubt or anxiety about whatever's going on in our lives, whether it's personally or collectively, right? When we do our spiritual work, when we light that bonfire and we beat the drum, do you see, we discover that light is already there. It's already there. And all we're doing is stoking it. Or we're putting it out, making it smaller. But within us, there is an invincible summer, an invincible light in the middle of the darkness. We had some unexpected family news the other day that was a little distressing to me, and we were driving, and there was a beautiful, beautiful cloud cover, like a low, fluffy cloud cover, and Karen said, "Look, see how the light is streaming under those clouds?" there's always light. There's always light. So, do we focus on the cloud? Or do we look for the light? Stoke the light. Burn brightly with the love. I love that we do our labyrinth on the winter solstice. I think it is a perfect representation of the way in which we engage with this spiritual process that we do when we are frightened, when we are in the dark. Right? And so the labyrinth invites us, as we move into the labyrinth, it invites us to release that which we are carrying around. Right? And that is, sometimes I believe my fear is based on, because I'm right. Because I know that those people are wrong. Right? And the more I cling to my rightness, the more my fear clings to me. And so to actually imagine, literally imagine releasing fear, doubt, anxiety. When we walk the labyrinth, and it's such an interesting, the labyrinth is designed, the one that we have is based on the Seven Circuit labyrinth from the Chartres Cathedral in France. And it's one of the oldest labyrinths in the Christian tradition. And there are many versions of labyrinths, but they all have one thing in common. I actually heard somebody ask, well, is it like a maze? No, it's not like a maze. You don't get lost. There's only one way in, one way out. But the thing about the labyrinth, as you walk it, this Seven Circuit labyrinth, is that as you walk it, you walk back and forth, and then all of a sudden you're close to the center, and then the next thing you know, you're way out here on the outside again. And then you're close to the center, and then you're like way out here on the end. You're like, what is going on? Kind of like our lives, right? We get close to the center, we get close to the truth, and then boom, something happens. Something happens in our own lives, something happens in the world, something happens in the culture, and we are way back here. We are way out on the outskirts. That light that is burning brightly barely illuminates. And we have to walk ourselves back in. And we walk ourselves back in by releasing the very things that feel so real. Because we are seduced by the reality of the conditions. We're seduced by the reality of our sense of separation. We're seduced by the reality of the fact that because I feel it, it must be real. But it's not spiritual truth. It's not the truth with a capital T. And so the labyrinth walk is this elaborate representation of what it takes for us to keep releasing the very things that we hold on to. Now, let me say that differently. Releasing the patterns that we have become comfortable with in how to deal with challenges. My favorite pattern is worry. For a long time, I believed that if I didn't worry about it, I was jinxing the universe. That worry was literally my tax that I was paying to the universe for having it work out. Is that just sick? It took me the longest time to figure that out. Like, I was utterly invested in worry because that meant I was paying attention. That I cared about it, that I was all involved, and I was all engaged, and I was certainly all involved in what you were doing, and I was worrying about how that was impacting, and right, and I was in it. And I realized that somehow gave me credibility. I don't know. I felt like I was doing something. And whether we become anxious or paralyzed or worried or resigned or angry, right, these are all the habituated responses that we have. None of them are the truth. And so the walking in the labyrinth, in these elaborate circuits that take us closer to the center and back out again and closer and back out again, is that opportunity for us to really metaphorically experience our own journey. And then we come to the center. And if we've really been able to let go of anything at all, there's a little tiny opening. There's a tiny opening for the light, right? The light that comes from within, the light that comes from without, wherever that light happens to be pouring itself through us, there's that little bit of opening. And in the center of the labyrinth, we stand and we experience the light as intuition, insight, a new awareness, a deeper experience of truth, perhaps a thought about, well, maybe if we engaged in this moment this way, the path would be a little easier, or we would find ourselves actually on the journey we want to be on. We would be focusing on what ought to happen and not what ought not to happen. And as we walk back out of the labyrinth, it's the same thing. Sometimes we're close to the exit, and sometimes we're way back inside again, trying to figure out how do we get there from here, right? And that is our challenge of application as we seek to apply our spiritual principles. I couldn't that morning just apply it in the first 15 minutes of the morning. I had to apply it all throughout the day. I had to apply it while I was eating and while I was working, and I had to apply it as I was laying in bed going to sleep all day. And sometimes I felt like I was getting closer, and other times I did not feel like I was getting closer. I was further away again. But that's the practice, right? That's the practice of being the light, of burning our bonfire, of beating our drum, and absolutely standing in that place and moving in our lives to the best of our ability. And the promise of the labyrinth, not only will you find your way in, but you will find your way out. It's not a maze, and it's not a trick. And we find our way back out again. And this ancient tradition that we have married with the solstice is such a beautiful representation of our own personal spiritual journey. And I believe it's the spiritual journey that we're on as humanity. It's the same way, opportunity for us to live in the light, to live as the light, to be the love. Yeah. So the other thing I want to talk about is I want to talk about this thing, love. I spent a lot of time when I first got into the science of mind thinking, okay, love. This is our teaching, love and law. I get the law part. I get the law part. This love part, there's a lot of people in the world I do not love. I do not want to be in a relationship with them. I certainly don't want to marry them, right? And I confess. Karen is so good to me. I confess I got the Disney Channel. I'm so excited. And I grew up on all those stupid, princess movies. Somebody was going to come along and save me, and I'd have love forever and all that good stuff, right? Yeah. So we know how that works out. And actually, it's working out fabulously now, but it was a little bit like the labyrinth. It was getting closer, further away. Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm. So I I don't really like to use the word love as much in this context, because I think that we have such a false idea. Right? We've been sold a bill of goods, basically, by Disney and Hallmark. Right? Really. Right? And that's what love is. And I don't think that that's what the bonfire of love is at all. So I was really reflecting on this week because I really was activating that part that I wanted to activate to move through this place of fear. And a number of words came to me that I actually prefer to love, only because, like God, love now has these very specific kinds of connotations. And I think that's why sometimes in our philosophy, we like to use the word compassion. Compassion. Compassion comes from the Latin, the root word of passion, to breathe with. Compassion, to breathe with. To breathe with. Now, I may not want to marry you, but I could certainly imagine breathing with you through something. I can certainly remember having had someone breathe through something with me. Walk with me through it, see my truth even when I couldn't, hold my hand when all I wanted to do was run away, pull me out of the dark when all I wanted to do was pull the covers over my head. Now, that feels like love to me. I've even had some people tell me hard truths I didn't want to hear because they saw the way that I was covering my truth up with that darkness. Compassion. Maybe the light of compassion for ourselves and for each other, for humanity. Man, I love it when somebody has compassion for my stupidity. Really. You know what I mean? And doesn't just, you know better, aren't you? You're so stupid. You know, and I do that. I do that plenty for myself. Thank you very much. I love it when somebody has compassion for my humanness without believing in my limitation. I think that's the other thing compassion means. Because certainly, whatever you're doing, I have done. I've been that angry, I've been that scared, I've been that stupid, I've been that self-centered, I've been all of those things. Right? And when we can be that light for each other, then we're bringing the bonfire, and we are beating the drum of spiritual truth, and we are beating out those false ideas. I also really noticed that for me, compassion is very undefended. I guess I'm just true confession up here this morning. I don't know what else to say about that. Undefendedness is not necessarily my go-to place. It's not. But I think that's what the light of love is, right? An undefended place. Instead of that walled sanctuary, right? If my light is bright enough, I don't need walls. And then my light and your light can mingle together. And we can create even more light. That undefendedness. That speaks to me of love. Not romantic love, not Hallmark love, not Disney love. But true ability to allow us to each be who we are in some profound way. And to share that light that is the truth of our being. And so the word that came to me was open-heartedness. Open-heartedness. I think love is open-heartedness. Years ago, I read a definition of love. It is the positive regard toward someone. A positive regard toward someone. I've liked that for a long time. To just have a positive regard for people. See them positively, give them the gift of our positive attention, our positive expectation, our positive reinforcement, just our positive awareness of the truth of who they are and the human experience they might be having. And I really noticed in this process, as I was going through this past week, that while I could have positive regard, that it didn't really work if I was closed off. If I was walled in, making safety for my sanctuary. And so that open-heartedness, I hope you can read this. Being open-hearted to absolutely everything leads to a beautiful sense of joy. Yes, that's my experience. Flinging open the gates of the temple. not closing them down, flinging open the gates of the temple, building a bonfire big enough that a whole boatload of people can stand around it, as opposed to just the people that we know and care about, right? Open-heartedness. And then those moments of joy creep in so unexpectedly. And in that process of releasing fear and releasing our anxiety and our judgment and our whatever all of that stuff is, we are literally creating space for joy to show up. And isn't that what a big part of the holiday season is about? Right? For us to be able to, well, I guess I said it last week, practice the way of being in the world that allows joy to show up. I also think that love is fierce. You know, I think about that oil lamp and it's a soft glow. There is nothing soft or glowing about a bonfire, right? It is a giant flame, and if you get too close, you will get scorched. So there is a fierce love that is also called for, that we are invited to experience and to express. A fierce love that says, no, I am about the light. I'm about compassion. I'm about being for what ought to happen. A fierce, deliberate willingness to be determined about that. And I think that's the other thing that we sometimes misunderstand, right? Love is all mushy and gushy and it's all loving and accepting and wonderful and oh, it feels so good, except for when it doesn't. Right? Yeah. And so there's that aspect of love. Kuan Yin is considered the female Buddha, right? Kuan Yin is she's the Buddha of compassion. And mostly in the West, we see her holding a lotus, and she's sitting on a lotus, and she's all in a very peaceful and beautiful state. But there are many representations of Kuan Yin that we don't see as much in the West, where she's holding a lotus in one hand and a sword in the other. It is called the sword of compassion. And the sword of compassion cuts away the illusion. The sword of compassion says, I love you so fiercely, I'm going to tell you the truth. I love you so fiercely, I will not collude with your limitations, your smallness, nor will I collude with your fear or your doubt. That fierce compassion is the sword that cuts through our seduction into separation. And so we need that kind of love too. So yeah, I gave myself a couple good talking tos that day. Really? Like really? How long are you going to sit in this? How long are you going to sit in this? You know what to do. Are you going to do it? No. Mm-mm. Yeah, you know, this is why I don't have, this is why I have the personal trainer I do, because most personal trainers like, go for it, you can do it, 3 more, 2 more, go. And I'm like, yeah, make me. That does not work for me. Well, if I do that to myself, that's that little inner voice goes, yeah, right, I'm not doing it. I'm clinging to my fear or my anger or my anxiety. And I have to sometimes be fiercely compassionate with myself. So I think this is what it means to be the light of love this holiday season. I think it is lighting the eternal flame. I think it is creating a giant bonfire. I think it is having the faith that we have enough light, no matter what darkness we find ourselves in, personally, individually, or collectively. And I think it is beating the drum of our spiritual practices and spiritual truths to ward off, to dispel those evil spirits. Yeah. I can't read that up there. I hope you can read it. It's a little tiny. I'll read it to you. Emerson says this: "What lies behind you and what lies in front of you pales in comparison to what lies inside." What lies in front of you and what lies behind you pales. The past or the future, the old patterns or the fear, pales in comparison to what lies within you. So I want to close with this reading from Ernest Holmes. I just invite you to listen. Go within if you choose. That instinctive sense of the divine presence, which is inherent to us all, is there because it is true. And in the state of each person's intellectual capacity to perceive the truth, it comes out, and to us becomes our God. It is forever proclaiming its own being. There is a power and a presence in the universe which responds to us so completely, so perfectly, that we shall be amazed when we realize how completely and perfectly it does. Our communication with the divine must of necessity be and always remain an inner light. And as we become conscious of darkness, only when we are without faith. For faith is ever the light of our day and the light on our way, making the way clearly visible to us, even when to all others it may be beset by obstacles and the ongoing roughness of life. If we will have faith in ourselves, faith in our fellow humans, in the universe, and in the divine reality, that faith will light the place in which we find ourselves. And by the light of this faith, we will be able to see that all is good.